There's a detail in the timeline of the 2026 Kumamoto earthquake that is harder to absorb than the magnitude number or the death count or the evacuation orders, though all of those are severe. The Aeon Mall in Kashima Town, whose second floor collapsed during the July 28th earthquake and whose gas line failure triggered an explosion approximately 1 hour later that killed 3 people, had been open for 45 days. It reopened on June 13th, 2026, not as a new mall, as a rebuilt one. The original structure was destroyed in the 2016 Kumamoto earthquake, the magnitude 7.0 main shock that killed 273 people and damaged or destroyed tens of thousands of buildings across the same prefecture that was struck again on July 28th. After the 2016 disaster, the Aeon Group rebuilt the Kashima Town location. They took the years required to do it correctly. When it reopened in June 2026, it was described as a fresh start for one of the region's main shopping and entertainment centers, a symbol of recovery. After the 2016 disaster, a supermarket in the old mall had offered discounted rice balls to survivors, becoming a specific local emblem of community resilience and mutual support. The reopened mall was meant to continue that story. On July 28, 2026, at 4:27 in the afternoon, the mall was in the middle of its afternoon shopping rush when the ground began to move. On July 28, 2026, at approximately 16:27:15 JST, an earthquake struck Kumamoto Prefecture in southern Japan with a magnitude of NWW 6.8, MJMA 7.1, at a depth of 10 kilometers. At least 36 people were killed and dozens more were injured. 36 confirmed dead as of August 1st, 2026. The number that started at 13 on July the 28th evening climbed to 18, then to 25, then to 30 when The Guardian published its July 30th update. Death toll in Japan earthquake rises to 30 as aftershock and heat hamper rescue efforts, and then to 34, and then to 36 by 7:30 on August 1st as Kumamoto Prefecture's Disaster Response Headquarters published its latest assessment. The number that the Associated Press described in an article on July 31st under the headline, "Quake survivors in southwestern Japan sleep in cars in sweltering heat as death toll rises to 34. The number that is not finished. To understand why it has kept rising, why the count that began at 13 on the first evening has continued climbing 4 days later, you need to understand the specific character of this disaster, not just a single seismic shock that caused casualties at the moment of impact, but a cascading, compounding sequence of events that has been generating additional harm day by day. The initial earthquake deaths, the Aeon Mall explosion deaths that arrived an hour after the shaking stopped, the Nippon Paper Industries Mill deaths from the chimney collapse, and now the emerging specter of heat-related casualties among the 267,000. People under evacuation orders in a region where summer temperatures in late July run at levels that are medically dangerous even for healthy adults and become acutely lethal for elderly evacuees in shelters without electricity, or for people sleeping in their cars, because there is no room in the official evacuation centers. Extreme summer heat in Kumamoto, combined with fractured water, pipes, and a lack of electricity for air conditioning are leading to concerns that Tectonic quake-related casualty figures may rise still further as dehydration and heat stroke take their toll. The heat emergency that is developing on top of the earthquake disaster is the secondary story that has not yet received the coverage it will eventually require. Japan in July and August is subject to heat conditions that public health authorities classify as life-threatening for vulnerable populations, even in normal years, with no structural damage, with working air conditioning, with functioning water supply. The combination of a major earthquake that has fractured water pipes, knocked out electricity across affected areas, has overwhelmed the shelter capacity of official evacuation facilities, forcing tens of thousands of people to spend nights in their cars in temperatures that reach into the mid-30s Celsius overnight, is a public health emergency that runs in parallel to the search and rescue operation and that will produce its own mortality separate from the earthquake's immediate structural deaths. The Japanese government and international observers of earthquake responses have a specific term for deaths that occur after the shaking stops and are attributable to the conditions created by the disaster rather than the earthquake itself. Disaster-related deaths. Japan's 2016 Kumamoto earthquake sequence produced 273 direct deaths and an additional significant number of disaster-related deaths from illness, stress, and inadequate shelter conditions in the following weeks. The 2026 earthquake is generating the same sequence in the same prefecture in conditions that are arguably more severe because July's heat is more intense than the April conditions of the 2016 event. Now, the fault. Because the fault that produced the July 28, 2026 earthquake is the same fault system that produced the 2016 earthquake, And understanding why the same fault system has produced two major earthquakes within a decade is the central question that Japanese seismologists are currently analyzing. Kumamoto Prefecture is located on Kyushu, the most southerly of Japan's four main islands. It lies at the southern end of the Japan Median Tectonic Line, Japan's longest, where a system of active fault forks in two directions at the Beppu Hanayama fault zone. The continuation of the median tectonic line to the southeast of Kumamoto is a major southwest-northeast trending strike-slip fault system, consisting of the Hinagu Fault to the south and the Futagawa Fault to the north, the Hinagu Fault and the Futagawa Fault. These are the same structures that ruptured in April 2016 when an M6.2 foreshock on April 14th was followed 2 days later by the M7.0 main shock that did the catastrophic damage. At 10 kilometers depth and 20 to 48 kilometers from Kumamoto City, depending on which study defines the epicenter precisely, the 2026 earthquake's geometry places it in the southern portion of the fault system that produced the 2016 main shock, potentially a segment adjacent to the 2016 rupture, or a segment within the 2016 rupture zone that has reloaded enough in the decades since to produce another major earthquake. The earthquake struck at 1627 JST on July 28th, reaching the maximum Japan Meteorological Agency seismic intensity of 7 in the municipalities of Uki City and Hikawa Town in Kumamoto Prefecture. JMA intensity, 7. This is the highest level on Japan's seismic intensity scale, a level defined not by ground acceleration in engineering terms alone, but by observed damage. Most houses collapse, large landslides occur, ground deformation is widespread. It is the level that the 2016 Kumamoto main shock produced, the level that the 2011 Tohoku earthquake produced across coastal areas of northeastern Japan, the level that seismic engineers designed to prevent through the specific requirements of Japan's post-1981 building code. The fact that the 2026 earthquake produced JMA intensity 7 in two municipalities, not just a single point of maximum shaking, but a zone of maximum shaking covering multiple communities, explains both the scale of the evacuation orders and the scale of the structural damage. Kumamoto Castle, which had been undergoing repairs from the 2016 earthquake for the entire decade between the two events, lost additional wall sections on July 28th. The iconic stone walls of the castle, a 400-year-old structure that survived both the 2016 main shock and a decade of aftershocks during the repair process, were hit again before the repairs were complete. This detail is not merely symbolic. The castle's walls were already compromised from a decade of ongoing repair work. The additional 2026 damage means the repair timeline extends further. Resources must be redirected from the broader disaster recovery to the castle. Assessment and the symbol of Kumamoto's recovery from 2016 is visibly damaged again at the exact moment that the city is beginning a new recovery from 2026. The specific structural failures that produced the most casualties deserve individual attention because they illustrate the categories of building type and situation that produce the most harm in a shallow magnitude 7 earthquake. Some 3,000 customers were evacuated to the parking lot, but 3 people were killed in the blast and 3 store employees remain missing. Part of the second floor of the Aeon Mall in Kashima Town collapsed, and about an hour later a suspected gas leak explosion tore through the complex. The sequence at the Aeon Mall: earthquake at 4:27 p.m., second floor collapses, 3,000 customers evacuate to parking lot, gas leak explosion. Approximately 1 hour later, in a portion of the mall where employees were still present, the evacuation of 3,000 customers to the parking lot saved lives. The employees who remained in the building, potentially performing post-earthquake checks, securing equipment, managing the emergency evacuation, or simply unable to exit before the explosion, were the ones killed. The 3 still missing as of the most recent reports are store employees, not customers. This sequence, structural collapse followed by secondary explosion from gas infrastructure failure, is one of the most documented patterns in major urban earthquake events. The 1994 Northridge earthquake in California produced fires from gas line failures that burned for days after the shaking stopped. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake's most devastating damage came not from the shaking itself, but from the fires ignited by ruptured gas mains that burned for 3 days through a city whose water supply was compromised by the same earthquake. The engineering of modern buildings to withstand major earthquake shaking has improved dramatically over the past century. The engineering of gas distribution infrastructure to survive those same earthquakes without rupturing has been an ongoing challenge, precisely because the pipes must connect to buildings that move in different directions from the ground during an earthquake, and those connection points are often vulnerable, even in otherwise well-designed systems. The Kyushu Expressway split open. The Kyushu Expressway is the primary north-south highway corridor of Kyushu Island. the critical infrastructure connection between Kumamoto and the rest of Japan's transportation network. A surface rupture or severe deformation event capable of splitting open a major expressway is a damage indicator that seismological surveys use to constrain the magnitude and mechanism of the underlying fault rupture. It also has immediate operational consequences, severing the primary highway connection for emergency vehicles, supply convoys, and evacuees trying to reach shelter outside the most affected areas. With the Kyushu Expressway compromised, the logistics of moving search and rescue equipment, food and water, medical supplies, and personnel into the worst affected areas became significantly more complex in the first 24 hours after the earthquake. Kumamoto Prefecture has issued emergency safety measures, covering 46,710 households, 92,743 people, and evacuation orders affecting 127,647 households, or approximately 267,285 people. 9 prefectures had deployed emergency firefighting teams, including 347 ground personnel and 4 helicopters, with combined local and national response forces totaling approximately 1,400 personnel as of 12 USGS on July the 30th. Since the earthquake, rescue teams have saved 98 people and transported 620 individuals to safety. 1,400 response personnel. 9 prefectures contributing. Resources. 98 people saved in active rescues, 620 transported to safety. These are the numbers of a functioning emergency response system operating at significant scale. Japan's disaster response infrastructure, refined through the lessons of the 1995 Kobe earthquake, the 2004 Chuetsu earthquake, the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, the 2016 Kumamoto earthquake, the 2024 Noto Peninsula earthquake, and dozens of other significant events in the intervening years, represents decades of institutional learning applied to a specific geography that experiences more major earthquakes than almost any comparable area on Earth. The speed and scale of the response is the reason the 2026 Kumamoto earthquake's death toll, while tragic, is not in the hundreds. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake at 10 kilometers depth in a populated area has the physical energy to produce much higher casualty counts than 36 confirmed deaths if the building stock is highly vulnerable and the emergency response is slow. Japan's modern building code, revised most significantly after the 1981 Building Standard Law update and again after the 1995 Kobe earthquake, has substantially reduced the fraction of the building stock that suffers catastrophic collapse under seismic intensity 7 shaking. The Aeon Mall's second-floor collapse is a significant structural failure. The fact that 3,000 customers were evacuated before the explosion is the evidence that the primary evacuation infrastructure functioned. Now, the 4 things scientists are specifically watching in the days following the July 28th event. The first is the aftershock sequence. The JMA issued a formal warning that strong aftershocks could continue over the coming days immediately after the main shock. This is not a generic caution. It is based on Omori's law, the empirical relationship between the magnitude of a main shock and the expected frequency of aftershocks, and on the specific shallow fault system that produced the 2026 event. Shallow strike-slip faults on the median tectonic line have produced significant aftershock sequences after every major rupture in Japan's instrumental record. The 2016 Kumamoto earthquake sequence is the most relevant example. The April 14th M6.2 event was the foreshock, and the April 16th M7.0 was the main shock, a sequence where what appeared to be the main event was actually a foreshock to a larger rupture 2 days later. The 2826 earthquake could be either the main shock of its sequence or a foreshock to a subsequent larger event. The aftershock monitoring in the first 72 hours after a major shallow earthquake is the data that scientists use to assess which scenario is more likely, based on how the sequence's energy distribution compares to statistical models of Omori's law decay. The second is the Nankai Trough probability reassessment. After every significant earthquake in southwestern Japan, the JMA conducts a formal assessment of whether the event has changed the probability of a Nankai Trough megaquake. The Nankai Trough is the offshore subduction zone where the Philippine sea plate is sliding beneath the Eurasian plate along Japan's Pacific coast, the fault system capable of producing a magnitude 8 to 9 earthquake that would affect all of southern Japan simultaneously and generate a major tsunami. The probability of a Nankai Trough megaquake in any given 30-year period is estimated at 70 to 80% under normal conditions. After the April 2026 Sanriku earthquake off northeastern Japan, this channel covered the JMA's megaquake probability assessment that raised the probability to 10 times background for a brief window. The July 28th Kumamoto earthquake, occurring on the median tectonic line within the broad tectonic region affected by Nankai Trough. Stress dynamics triggers the same formal reassessment process. The specific Kulo-MB stress transfer from the Hinagu-Futagawa rupture to the offshore Nankai Trough is being calculated by researchers at the Disaster Prevention Research Institute at Kyoto University as of this week. The third is the heat and infrastructure compound assessment. How many people will develop heat stroke or require medical evacuation from conditions in the evacuation centers and cars? How quickly can water supply be restored to the affected areas? How quickly can electricity be restored for air conditioning? The JMA and Japan's Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism are running parallel assessments of the infrastructure damage timeline. The answers to those timeline questions determine how long the compound disaster's most severe phase continues. If water is restored within a week and electricity within 2 weeks, the heat mortality risk is contained. If those timelines extend, the disaster-related death count grows beyond the 36 direct casualties confirmed as of August 1st. The fourth is the fault system's remaining potential. The 2016 Kumamoto earthquake ruptured the Futagawa Fault's northern section and the Hinagu Fault's northern section in a bilateral rupture propagating northeast and southwest simultaneously. The 2026 earthquake appears to have ruptured a portion of the Hinagu Fault system's southern or central section, potentially a section that was stress-loaded by the 2016 rupture rather than relieved by it. The geodetic GPS data from Japan's GNSS Earth Observation Network, the densest GPS monitoring network in the world, will provide the definitive picture of what slipped in the 2026 earthquake within days to weeks of the event. That slip model will then be used to calculate what sections of the Hinagu-Futagawa system are now at elevated stress, what sections have been partially relieved, and whether any sections are now closer to failure than they were before July 28th. The Nippon Paper Industries mill in Yatsushiro, whose chimney collapse contributed to the disaster's toll and whose structural damage report is still incomplete as of August 1st, is an industrial facility on a coastal site in Yatsushiro City, approximately 50 kilometers south of Kumamoto City. Industrial facilities, in coastal earthquake zones, carry a specific class of secondary risk, not only the structural damage to the facility itself, but potential environmental contamination from processed chemicals, pulping agents, and paper-making compounds. If storage tanks or process vessels are damaged and release their contents into the surrounding waterways and coastal environment, the full environmental assessment of the Nippon Paper facility damage has not been completed. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's phrase, "a race against time," was used specifically in reference to the search for missing people in the days immediately after the earthquake. It captures the operational reality of search and rescue. In the hours and first few days after a major structural collapse event, rescuers are operating in a window where the probability of finding living survivors is high, and where each additional hour represents a meaningful reduction in that probability. The Aeon Mall rescue operation, with people still missing as of July 31st, is the specific race that Takaichi's statement addresses. Under the rubble of a commercial building that has partially collapsed and then experienced an internal explosion, the conditions for survival are determined by the specific void spaces created by the collapse, the temperature and oxygen level within those voids, and how quickly rescue teams can physically access them without triggering additional collapses. Japan has the finest search and rescue capability of any nation for exactly this type of event. Urban search and rescue teams, the USAR teams that Japan has sent to Haiti, Nepal, Turkey, and every other major international earthquake disaster, are operating in Kashima Town applying their own methodology to their own prefecture's emergency. The tools they use, structural assessment engineers who evaluate collapse geometry and identify likely void spaces, fiber optic cameras, and acoustic listening equipment that can detect survivors through concrete and rubble, and the specific techniques for stabilizing partially collapsed structures before personnel enter. All of that expertise and equipment is being deployed at the Aeon Mall site and at the Nippon Paper facility in Yatsushiro. The JMA warned that further quakes may strike the area in the coming days, with an official saying, "As the place where the latest earthquake occurred is shallow, this shows that many earthquakes have occurred." The agency warned that strong aftershocks could continue over the coming days. Many earthquakes have occurred. The JMA official statement is not reassurance. It is a technical observation about the seismicity history of the Kumamoto region that is simultaneously true and alarming in its implications. The median tectonic line in the Kumamoto region has produced major earthquakes repeatedly throughout recorded history in Japan. The 2016 earthquake occurred there. The 2026 earthquake occurred there. The fault system has been accumulating stress from the relative motion of the tectonic plates it accommodates for millions of years. It releases that stress through earthquakes. It has released it before 2016 and before 2026, and it will release it after 2026. The question is not whether this system will produce future earthquakes. It will. The question is when, and the aftershock sequence currently being monitored in real time by the JMA's Seismic network is the data that will help answer the most immediate version of that question. Whether the July 28th event was the main shock of the sequence, or whether a larger event could still follow. The 36 people confirmed dead as of August 1st are the people whose stories are now permanently connected to a single Tuesday afternoon in Kumamoto Prefecture. The people who were in the Aeon Mall when the second floor gave way. The workers who elderly residents in buildings that could not survive JMA Intensity 7. Their deaths are the human expression of the fact that a shallow strike-slip earthquake on the Hinagu-Futagawa fault system strikes without meaningful warning at whatever time it strikes, and that the engineering and preparation that Japan has built to protect against this reality can reduce casualties significantly, but cannot eliminate them. Scientists are watching the aftershock sequence. They are running the Nankai Trough reassessment. They are waiting for the GPS slip model to resolve what ruptured and what is now more stressed. They are watching the heat emergencies medical toll, and they are watching the JMA's daily seismic bulletins for the specific signal that would indicate whether the earthquake that shook Kumamoto on July 28, 2026 was the event, or the warning. Subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. JMA updates its aftershock assessments daily. The GPS slip model from Japan's GeoNet network is expected within days. The heat and infrastructure compound emergency will develop through the first week of August. And if a significant aftershock or subsequent event occurs on the Hinagu-Futagawa system, this channel will cover it before it reaches anywhere else.